Let us execute an immediate, sweeping analytical vector shift away from subterranean execution cellars, weaponized home renovations, and the multi-generational family depravity of previous standalone equations, and plunge straight into the high-octane, calculation-heavy tracking grids of near-death cognitive mapping, weaponized memory recovery loops, and the fiercely protective, dangerously fragile world of a haunted survivor asset running a raw tactical survival loop. We are crossing the threshold directly into the hyper-monitored, adrenaline-slicked parameters of a radical psychological threshold experiment, exploring the lethal analytical parameters of an intense, past-fueled deception matrix with Dead in the Water, the exceptional, pulse-pounding speculative procedural thriller masterpiece engineered by the absolute undisputed sovereign of high-concept what-if traps, dark interlinking narrative universes, and high-velocity systemic dread, John Mars. This high-stakes narrative tracking sequence delivers an exceptional look at an operational crossroads where a fierce, obsessed primary asset running an unyielding safety loop, a calculating, manipulative stranger asset running a high-stakes proximity tracking and clinical resuscitation routine, and an absolute defense against a terrifying, long-buried childhood homicide ledger collide at terminal velocity. Let us map the strategic narrative grid. If you are an elite enthusiast of high-octane, slow-burn psychological thrillers where an endangered, hyper-observant protagonist must navigate an absolute maze of rigged memory fragments, corrupt medical boundary lines, and a deadly ring of active psychological frame-ups, while running a blind survival loop inside a completely compromised cognitive ecosystem, where an analytical mind uses deep behavioral profiling, calculated physiological near-death boundaries, and absolute emotional stamina to outmaneuver an invisible predatory executioner network, and where the author utilizes an incandescent, traumatized man survives a near drowning, only to glimpse a hidden memory of a dead boy, forcing him to systematically induce repeated clinical deaths to recover the truth diagnostic routine to test our hero's structural limits. This book is engineered to lock you in. Mars completely dominates the high-concept flatliner-style resuscitation puzzles meets suffocating serial killer dynamic, capturing the heart-racing intellectual momentum, suffocating domestic paranoia, and heavy deductive depth popularized by genre vargs like Gillian Flynn, Blake Crouch, Chris Carter, and Corinne Slaughter, while treating realistic near-drowning brainstem logistics, complex interlinked universe character cameos, and protective high-density physiological extraction grids with absolute technical mastery. The narrative tracking grid zeroes in on the highly volatile, calculation-heavy baseline of our central legendary powerhouse asset, Damon, operating under a severe calculation handicap of recent divorce trauma, intense emotional depletion, and a hyper-visible targeting canvas within his own mind's historical database. Behind Damon's rigorous daily routine footprints and tense personal history logs lies an intricate matrix of hidden faction allegiances, deeply buried childhood friction, and sharp, high-stakes tactical maneuvers. His collective defense mechanisms are locked down tight following an ill-fated open-water dare in the icy rib currents of Brighton Beach, his entire analytical focus strictly consumed by monitoring sudden threat vectors from an active, unseen psychological predator, parsing complex behavioral shifts from his overbearing ex-wife Melissa, and shielding his vulnerable waking sanity node from being entirely wiped out by a ruthless elite cleanup offensive. The spark ignites when an unexpected high-frequency structural anomaly breaches his active scanning perimeter. During the exact millisecond his consciousness slips beneath the waves, his entire life flashes before his eyes, unearthing a crystalline, impossibly terrifying vision of a dead red-haired boy, a face completely absent from his official biographical history logs. As the hostile investigative phases enter an increasingly lethal terminal tier across his ticking clock timeline, the waking hallucinations perfectly cross-reference an active decades-old serial killer file. The official diagnostic metrics of the global tracking centers flash white-hot when Damon's unauthorized counter-surveillance and radical self-experimentation routine reveals that the only path to extracting the full forensic data stream requires him to cross the threshold into clinical death again and again and again. The standard boundaries of routine psychological therapy and peaceful civilian compliance protocols crumble, and our central protagonist run completely out of standard diplomatic escape vectors. Damon forms a volatile, calculation-heavy pact with a highly manipulative stranger asset who is entirely too willing to manage his resuscitation cycles, thrusting him directly into an active, invisible war across the razor-thin veil between life and death, where deceptive confidants rasking their true tracking coordinates and a ruthless shadow network launch aggressive countermeasures to permanently suppress his survival data stream. The tactical parameters instantly explode as their historical and survival warfare turns completely active, transforming the isolated seaside apartments, dark clinical medical base, and private fortified residential zones into a volatile psychological pressure cooker and a physical battle zone.
Our protective, hyper-vigilant hero is forced to deploy his massive intuitive tradecraft, elite behavioral mapping skills, and raw physical stamina to preserve his focus before his adversary's relentless calculation-heavy proximity containment phase permanently deletes his boundaries. The threat vector remains purposeful and resolute, determined to deploy deep geographical insulation, continuous psychological gaslighting, and persistent dominance to shatter his defense, only to realize Damon's hardened survival protocols and shifting counter-narratives match their raw tactical speed step for step. Every midnight self-induced flatline sequence, every silent choice to stand off against an encroaching adversary behind standard architectural barriers, and every intense moment of channeling raw, unyielding survival mechanics chips away at his reliance on original peaceful rules. What follows is an exceptional, high-stakes war of perspective, tactical position, and raw human grit. We watch the Predator Network's deceptive perimeters completely unwrapped as John Mars reveals that the true victory requires more than just surviving an initial open-water accident or managing a difficult marital disclosure. It demands an absolute, uncompromising defense of individual dignity, personal truth, and systemic survival against a cold, calculating machine of domestic manipulation and psychopathic supremacy. While our central characters smooth over each other's psychological and defensive blind spots with devastating analytical force, creating a fiercely protective, absolute web of dark, possessive loyalty around their building alliance, a brutal series of close-quarters tactical confrontations and high-stakes evidentiary breakthroughs shifts the clock into its terminal phase, proving that iconic, terrifying legacy figures from the broader Mars universe have come to their final outpost. To survive the impending locked grid trap and permanently secure his sanctuary, our resilient protagonist must unleash an absolute, unyielding defense of his final boundary lines. It is a psychological thriller, speculative noir, serial killer mystery, high-velocity contemporary puzzle masterpiece that treats deep relational logistics and intense structural friction with elite precision. The tension here burns with a sharp, calculation-heavy intensity. We are talking about that high-frequency, one-induced flatline triggers a fatal serial killer Nexus showdown energy, where a sudden pause during an active franchise tactical briefing, an unexpected shift in an adversary's protective physical posture during a high-stakes standoff confrontation, or a heavy, possessive realization that an elite intelligence operative has completely mapped your personal coordinates carries massive structural weight. Mars writes with an exceptionally fresh, vivid, and beautifully blunt voice, perfectly capturing the heavy, oppressive atmosphere of a private executive vault before a major corporate takeover, and the distinct, subtle scent of polished mahogany, salt-crusted skin, medical plastic, cold copper, dynamic adrenaline, and pure, unadulterated suspense. What truly elevates this contemporary installment marvel into elite area is the author's unmatched ability to balance complex, high-stakes relationship dynamics and genuine protective power tradecraft alongside a breathtaking narrative pace and deep emotional hooks. Our protagonists don't rely on unbelievable superficial Hollywood superhero action tropes. Their immense situational intelligence, strategic patience, and profound survival instincts match the complexity of the chaotic modern corporate and high society underworld they dominate step for step, making their choices to risk everything feel profoundly authentic and deeply gripping. The pacing moves with calculated momentum, tracking intense conversational standoffs and breathtaking tactical breakthroughs before ratcheting up to an absolute jaw-dropping conclusion that delivers total, hard-earned advancement to their horizon. Dead in the Water is the definitive pro-level upgrade your high-stakes contemporary thriller and intense asset suspense library demands right now. It is elegant, immensely fast-paced, and utterly unput-upable. It proves that when your entire sanctuary is targeted by a cold, calculating institutional monster, the most revolutionary play you can execute is to lock your perimeters, trust your elite survival training, and fight like hell with your network to rewrite the data. So secure your personal reading sanctuary, review your emotional defensive perimeters, open your Kindle, and prepare to track the fleet.